This video is brought to you in part by TrueFire. Learn, practice, and play with TrueFire. Hi, this is Keith Williams. Welcome to 5-Watt World. We're interested in helping you get the most music from the least gear. I would argue that there are three dominant bass sounds in rock music: the Fender Precision, the Fender Jazz, and the Hofner violin or Beatle bass. Paul McCartney's use of the Hofner became such a big part of pop and rock history that I think a short scale bass should be in every player's arsenal. In fact, I think that with one flexible long scale bass like a Precision or a Jazz and a short scale bass to cover those classic 60 tones, you'd be all set. Very few instruments have the impact on music that make it worthy of its own short history, but the Hofner bass is certainly one of them. In McCartney's hands, it was on more hit records in such a short period of time that it helped define the sound of bass in modern music in our heads. So if you've been waiting for a look at the source of that Beatle bass sound, then stay tuned, because this is the 5-Watt World short history of the Hofner 500 violin bass. If you enjoy our videos, make sure to subscribe. And if you've already subscribed, grab a hoodie or a t-shirt or a Stomp preset pack to support what we do. And to become a bigger part of 5-Watt World, sign up for the Friends of 5-Watt on Patreon. The links are in the description. Karl Hofner founded the Hofner Company in 1887. He quickly became the largest instrument builder in the country. His son, Joseph and Walter, joined the company around 1920. After World War II, they were forced to relocate to West Germany, eventually settling in Bubenruth. The new factory there opened in 1950, later being expanded 3 times between 1953 and 1960 due to demand for their instruments. In more current times, Hofner was first sold to Boosey and Hawkes, and then to the Music Group, and then finally in 2004, Klaus Scholler, who had been the general manager at Hofner for many years, bought the company. He and his wife run the company to this day. During the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the Hofner instruments were distributed by Selmer of London, and it is of course these years that we are most interested in, as it accounts for Hofner guitars being in the hands of the Beatles. George Harrison used a President's model and a Club 40 very early in the group, and Lennon's first electric guitar was a Club 40 model that he bought at Hessey's Music Store in Liverpool in 1959. The band's original bassist, Stuart Sutcliffe, played a Hofner 500/5 bass. McCartney would also play this bass before acquiring his own Hofner. Sutcliffe's bass is now owned by the Hard Rock Cafe. In the 58 Hofner catalog in England, the natural finish, or 328, was referred to as blonde, and the 333 that Sutcliffe had was referred to as the brunette. But of course, we're all here because of Paul McCartney's use of the Hofner 500/1. Walter Hofner designed the 500/1 in 1955 and began production after first showing it to the public at the Frankfurt Music Fair in 1956. Walter created a semi-acoustic, electrically amplified bass. The hollow body design made it very light and easy to play, as well as giving it a rich tone similar to that of a traditional upright bass. The short scale of 30 inches also contributed to the tone that would be described as everything from full to tubby over the years. It's referred to as a semi-hollow because it's a hollow body instrument but lacks sound holes in the top. It was built very much like an acoustic guitar of the time, with a thin maple body, spruce top, and maple neck. It featured a 2-piece bridge design made of ebony, along with a metal trapeze-style tailpiece. McCartney actually used 2 different 501 basses during his career. The first bass was purchased new during the band's first visit to Hamburg in '61. Paul's often told the story of not having enough money for a Fender, which would have been about £100 at the time, compared to approximately £30 for the Hofner. It's very unlikely that he'd been able to walk into a shop and find a left-handed bass, and it's widely believed that it was ordered and specially built for him. Tony Sheridan, who was an Englishman who lived much of his life in Germany and was an early collaborator with the Beatles, said that there was very little demand for rock instruments in Germany at the time. He believes that the custom-ordered bass for McCartney might well have been the first left-handed bass Hofner ever built. Another source of supporting evidence for the custom order story is an article from a 1963 issue of Beat Monthly, where they stated that the bass had been, quote, altered, end quote, for him in Germany, and that they were not available in left-handed versions in England. They ended saying, quote, he didn't just go into a shop and buy it off the peg, he got it custom made. The 500/1 violin bass became his signature instrument and soon became widely referred to as the Hofner Beatle bass. As such, it became both an important part of the sound and the look of the Beatles. This 1961 model had both pickups mounted close together towards the neck, and this is the immediate visual clue to know which bass Paul is holding in photographs. That 61 was a hollow body bass with a solid spruce carved top and a one-piece flat back body. It had a three-piece maple neck and an unbound rosewood fingerboard with dot inlays, 22 frets, and a short 30-inch scale length. The headstock had a stacked Hofner logo and two on-a-side tuners. The bass had two diamond logo Hofner nickel-plated pickups in the forward positions. The control plate had two volume knobs and three switches. The switches were for bass on, treble on, and rhythm solo tones. McCartney usually played his Hofner with the treble switch off and the bass switch on. It had an adjustable wood bridge, a nickel-plated trapeze tailpiece, and a floating white pearled pickguard that matched the control plate. The 61 would become nicknamed the Cavern bass for the time the band played the famous Cavern Club. 500 series basses are very light and have a thin, comfortable neck that can be set very low for easy playing, all traits that would be welcome playing 6-hour gigs that the Beatles were playing in Germany at the time. But as lightweight instruments, they were correspondingly fragile and can fail at the neck joint over the long haul. I reached out to TrueFire to be my sponsor because I've used them for years. With over 2 million users worldwide, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced level player, TrueFire has lessons to enhance and inspire your playing. Get 35% off courses using the promo code 5watt35, or like I do, sign up for the All Access Pass to use the entire TrueFire catalog. I really like TrueFire, and I think if you give them a shot, you'll like them too. Sign up now to start your journey to being a better guitarist. I'd like to thank TrueFire for their support in making this video. 2 very busy years for the boys go past before McCartney would get his second Hofner. The bass arrived on October 4th, 1963, during the rehearsals for their appearance on the TV show Ready, Set, Go. He was seen with the new bass during the camera checks, but in the end, he went with his original bass for the filming of the show. Paul told the reporters that he'd ordered the second Hofner because, quote, "it was the only left-handed bass available, and I thought I should have a spare," end quote. The 63 is in many respects the same as the 61, except for the placement of the pickups and the style of the Hofner logo, the 63 having the script logo. The new bass had the Hofner staple-style pickups mounted apart, one near the neck and the other closer to the bridge. The 63 also had two on-a-side open-back tuners with rectangular buttons, an unbound dot inlay rosewood fingerboard with a 0 fret, and 3-ply white-black-white nut. The arch top was laminated spruce, and there was a 2-piece arch maple laminated back, all finished in Hofner's brunette sunburst finish. There was an ebony bridge and a nickel-plated tailpiece, and pearloid pickguard and control plate were the same as on the 61. This new bass would become Paul's main instrument, arriving late in 63, just prior to the Beatles' appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show in February of 64, and as such would also be the best-known Beatle bass. The image of the Beatles on Ed Sullivan would be etched in the minds of music fans throughout the world, in multiple generations. And the instruments used in that performance, Ringo's Ludwig kit, John's Rickenbacker 325, George with his Country Gentleman, and Paul with his Hofner, would be the defining image of their career. The music played that night changed everything, and the instruments played became the instruments of desire for every kid that watched it. Beatles manager Brian Epstein made a deal with Hofner's UK distributor, Selmer of London, to add a promotional swing tag to new Hofner instruments in music stores. Someone would run an ad in 1964 that said, quote, "When Paul McCartney says the Hofner violin bass is just great, you bet it's worth it," end quote. The 61 would later be repaired and refinished in 64. The top was refinished in a sunburst, and the pickup surrounds were replaced as the one closest to the neck had cracked. The original pickups were kept. The 61 would then be carried as a backup. By 65, he'd begun using the Rickenbacker bass, but he brought the 61 for the filming of the promo for Revolution in 68 and for the filming of the documentary Let It Be in 69. As an interesting side note, in the Revolution promo, Paul has the strap attached to the headstock instead of to the neck heel. It's assumed that this is to counteract the neck dive caused by the lightweight body of the instrument, something that might have been more of a concern after playing the Rickenbacker for a number of years. And Paul would use that 63 Hofner until 65, when he got his Rickenbacker 4001S. See my video on the history of Rickenbacker basses for more details on that. But even after he began using his Rick, he would still use the Hofner on occasion. During the U.S. tour in 1966, Paul would remove the pickguard from his 63 Hofner and use it in that form going forward. So if you're trying to replicate the specific look of McCartney using the Hofner, you first have to choose between the Cavern and the 63 basses, and then early versus later Beatles tours with or without the pickguard. During the shooting of the Let It Be documentary, the 61 bass was stolen from a closet at Abbey Road Studios, along with Harrison's Gretsch Tennessean and a Rickenbacker 360/12 string. This accounts for why we see Paul using the 61 early in the film, but then only the 63 for the rest of the film and for the famous rooftop performance filmed on January 30th, 1969. Also during the filming to Let It Be, we see a Bassman sticker appear on the bass. As a load of Fender gear had been delivered during the filming, it's assumed that the sticker came from the Fender Bassman amp delivered at the time. McCartney would go back to using the Rickenbacker for the Abbey Road album, and his Rick was his primary bass in the 70s and 80s with Wings. But he went back to using the 63 again on the 1989 album Flowers in the Dirt. The album was a collaboration with Elvis Costello, and Costello asked McCartney to bring the 500 out of retirement to play it on the record. As of 2022, McCartney still has his original 63 Hofner 500 and has continued to play the bass and still uses it regularly in performances. But the relationship with Hofner extends into recent history as well. In 2012, a concert was organized to celebrate Queen Elizabeth's Diamond Jubilee. The concert was held on the Mall in front of Buckingham Palace, and Paul McCartney was to be the headlining act. Without contacting McCartney, Hofner had two 500/1 basses painted with a Union Jack, where the blue and red were sprayed in, but the white was left out and the natural wood of the bass showed through. There were two sprayed this way, and they were stock basses that had been pulled for the project. One was sent to Paul and one was kept by Hofner. At the show, McCartney played his original 63, but for the last song, Obla Di, Obla Da, he switched to the Jubilee bass. After the concert, he was photographed next to the Queen holding that bass. And finally, in August of 2016, Hillary Clinton held a fundraiser for her upcoming presidential bid at Jimmy Buffett's house. The ticket-only event would feature Jimmy Buffett, John Bon Jovi, and Paul McCartney. The problem was that Paul didn't have his bass with him. His crew was able to locate a left-handed 1967 500/1 for him to use at the event. He liked the bass so much that he purchased it as a backup for his touring. McCartney kept the 67 in his collection and recently had it refurbished, including a neck reset. It served in this role until 2018, when Hofner built him a custom bass for this purpose. My buddy Jeff McErlane told me a great story about McCartney's 63. Jeff was good friends with well-known New York-based luthier and repairman Flip Scipio. For many years, Flip was the head repair and restoration guy at Mandolin Brothers in Staten Island. Sometime in the 90s, McCartney's guitar tech wanted to have someone look over Paul's famous 63 for some repairs, and not surprisingly, Flip got the call. And so it was that Flip found himself lifting out of its case one of the most famous bass guitars in history. As he turned it over, checking the condition, he realized that a set list was still taped to the top of the bass. McCartney's tech verified that it was the set list for the Beatles' final concert on the roof at Abbey Road. And what's cooler than that? First, I need to thank Andy Babiuk for his book, Beatles Gear, which was the source of much of the detail in this video. It's an extraordinary book, and if you're a Beatles fan, it should be on your shelf. I also need to thank Nick Wass from Bass Player magazine for his excellent article, The History of Paul McCartney and His Iconic Hofner 500/1 Bass Guitar, for his coverage of the most recent Hofners Paul has used. I need to thank Francisco de Boras for his permission to use clips of him playing his vintage 1967 Hofner with the later Blade pickups. Francisco shows the versatility of these basses. I need to thank Clemens Cathcart for his permission to use the clip of him playing an original 64 Hofner 500/1. I need to thank the Music Emporium for their permission to use the clip of Valet Etienne playing a vintage 66 Hofner in the video. As you might imagine, I had a tough time finding any clips of someone playing a vintage Hofner that didn't play a Beatles tune. That would create a copyright strike for the video. I need to thank everyone that stopped by the store and grabbed a hoodie, a t-shirt, or a Stomp preset pack. In particular, I need to thank the friends of 5 Watt on Patreon. You're all 5 Watt World. I just make the videos. If I missed your favorite detail from the Beatle bass history, leave it in the comments for everyone to enjoy. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and hit that too. If you like the style of video, you might also enjoy the history of the Rickenbacker bass to get more of that McCartney bass journey info. Until next time, I'm Keith Williams. Thanks for being a part of the 5 Watt World.